At 2 a.m. in a rundown roadside motel, a single mother hears a violent crash echo from the office downstairs. She rushes out to check. Through a gap in the curtain, she sees an elderly woman collapsed on the floor. Without hesitation, she grabs a shovel, smashes the window, drops to her knees to stop the bleeding, and calls for help. What she doesn't know is that this reckless moment in the middle of the night won't just save a life, it will pull her and her child into a secret buried for decades, setting off a chain of events that will change their lives forever. Let me take you back. Not to that rainy night at the motel, but further. 18 months before, when Claire still had a name tag and a desk and a life that made sense. She'd worked at the Millbrook Public Library for 11 years. Started as a shelver, worked her way up to assistant librarian. It wasn't glamorous. The pay was nothing special, but she loved it. The smell of old books, the quiet hum of the reading room, the way people's faces lit up when you helped them find exactly what they needed. Ben had grown up there, first toddling between the shelves, later coming by after school when he was old enough. He'd spread out his papers on one of the little tables, and Claire would bring him apple slices and watch him from behind the circulation desk. Those were good days, simple days. Then the city cut the budget. "I'm sorry, Claire. There's nothing I can do." Her supervisor couldn't even look her in the eye. "It's happening everywhere. Libraries, parks, community centers. They're slashing everything." 11 years, gone in a 15-minute meeting. She told herself it would be okay. She had savings. She had skills. She'd find something else. But the job market didn't care about her skills. Every application disappeared into a void. Every interview led nowhere. Weeks turned into months, and the savings account that had once felt solid began to shrink like ice in the sun. And then there was Daniel, her husband. The man she'd married 12 years ago, back when they were both young and stupid and convinced that love was enough. Somewhere along the way he'd stopped being the person she fell in love with. Or maybe she had. Or maybe they both had. "I can't do this anymore, Claire." He was packing a suitcase, wouldn't look at her. "This stress, this uncertainty. I'm not built for it. We're supposed to be a team, we're supposed to figure this out together." I know, he zipped the suitcase. "But I can't. I'm sorry." He left that night, filed for divorce 2 weeks later, took half of what little they had left. Claire stood in the kitchen of their apartment, soon to be not their apartment, and wondered how everything had fallen apart so fast. Ben came out of his room. He'd heard everything. Of course he had. "Mom? Are we going to be okay?" She pulled him close, pressed her lips against the top of his head. "Yeah, baby, we're going to be okay." She didn't know if that was true either. The eviction notice came 2 months later. By then Claire had stopped counting the rejection emails, stopped checking her phone for calls that never came. She'd taken a job at a fast food place for 3 weeks before they cut her hours to nothing. Then a cleaning service that paid cash under the table until the owner decided he didn't need her anymore. The day they lost the apartment, Claire packed their lives into the Honda. Clothes in garbage bags, books in boxes, Ben's drawings carefully stored in a folder she kept on the front seat. "Where are we going?" he asked. "Somewhere safe." But there was nowhere safe, not really. The first night they slept in the car behind a Walmart. Claire kept the doors locked and barely closed her eyes. Ben curled up in the back seat with his stuffed dog, a ratty thing he'd had since he was 3, and didn't complain. Not once. The second night was a church parking lot. The third, a rest stop on the highway where the fluorescent lights buzzed all night and trucks roared past every few minutes. Claire learned things she never wanted to know. Which gas stations had bathrooms you could use without buying anything? Which shelters had beds and which ones were full of people who'd steal your shoes while you slept? Which dumpsters behind grocery stores had food that was still good? She learned how to stretch a dollar until it screamed. How to wash clothes in a sink and dry them over the car's heating vents. How to smile at people who looked right through her, because if you stopped smiling, you might never start again. And Ben, her sweet, brilliant, too perceptive boy, learned too. He learned to be quiet, to not ask for things, to fold his clothes so they fit in his backpack without wrinkling, to never tell anyone their real situation. "People treat you different when they know," Claire told him once. "Not always bad. Sometimes they just get awkward, and awkward is almost worse." so we keep it to ourselves. Okay, Mom. He was 10 years old and already keeping secrets that would have crushed most adults. They found the Silver Pines Motel in early November, 3 months after losing the apartment. By then, Claire had exactly $312 to her name, the result of weeks of collecting cans, doing odd jobs, and one lucky day when she found a $20 bill in a parking lot. The motel sat on Route 17, about 40 miles outside the city. It was the kind of place you drove past without noticing. A single-story strip of rooms with peeling paint and a parking lot full of potholes. The sign advertised weekly rates, which was the only reason Claire pulled in at all. The woman behind the counter looked up from a crossword puzzle. 70-something, white hair pulled back tight, reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. Her name tag said Eleanor. Help you. I saw you have weekly rates, $175, cash only. No parties, no drugs, no trouble. Claire did the math in her head. 2 weeks would leave her with almost nothing. But 2 weeks was 2 weeks and winter was coming. 1 room please. Eleanor's eyes moved past Claire to the window where Ben was visible in the car drawing in his notebook. That your boy? Yes ma'am. How old? 10. Something shifted in Eleanor's face. Claire couldn't read it. Not pity exactly, but something close. Recognition maybe. Understanding. Room 7. End of the row. Quietest one I got. She slid a key across the counter. Ice machines by the office. Checkouts at 11, but if you need an extra hour just let me know. Thank you. Claire started to turn away, but Eleanor's voice stopped her. There's a church 2 miles down the road. First Baptist. They do free dinners on Wednesday nights. No questions asked. Claire's throat tightened. Thank you, she said again, quieter this time. Don't mention it. Room 7 was small. 2 double beds with thin mattresses and scratchy sheets. A dresser with a TV that got 3 channels. A bathroom with a shower that ran hot for exactly 7 minutes before turning ice cold. A mini fridge that hummed like a dying wasp. A hot plate on the counter next to a microwave that sparked if you used it too long. To Claire it looked like paradise. We have a room, Ben. A real room. He stood in the doorway, taking it all in with those sharp eyes of his. Then he walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot, at the highway beyond, at the trees that lined the road like sentinels. For how long? 2 weeks. Maybe longer if I find work. He nodded. Didn't ask any follow-up questions. He'd learned not to. That night they ate peanut butter sandwiches and watched a nature documentary on the fuzzy TV. Ben fell asleep with his head on Claire's shoulder, his stuffed dog clutched against his chest. She sat awake for hours, listening to the rain on the roof, doing math in her head. $137 left. 14 days. $9.78 per day for food, gas, everything else. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. But for tonight, just for tonight, they had walls and a roof and a door that locked. It would have to be enough. The days at the Silver Pines fell into a rhythm. Every morning, Claire woke before dawn. She'd shower quickly. 6 minutes, no more, to avoid the cold water, and then sit at the small table by the window, updating her resume on her phone, searching job listings, sending applications into the void. Ben would wake around 7. He was homeschooling himself at this point, using library books and free educational websites Claire had bookmarked. He never complained about it. Never asked why he couldn't go to a real school with other kids. He just did what needed to be done. Mom, did you know that this motel used to be a train depot? They were eating breakfast, oatmeal made with hot water from the bathroom sink, and Ben was flipping through a book about local history he'd found in the motel's tiny lending library. Where'd you hear that? Mrs. Eleanor told me. She said her husband used to know everything about this building. Like all the secret stuff from when it was first built, he kept records and maps and everything. Claire wasn't really listening. She was counting the money in her wallet for the 3rd time that morning, hoping the numbers would somehow change. $89. Down from $137 last week. They had 5 days left on their room rental, and no way to pay for another week. That's interesting, baby. Do you think there's hidden stuff in the walls, like old train stuff? Maybe. Ben went quiet, watching her. He knew something was wrong. He always knew. "Are we okay, Mom?" She forced herself to smile. "We're fine, eat your oatmeal." Claire spent most of each day looking for work. She'd walk into businesses with her smile plastered on, asking if they were hiring. Fast food places, gas stations, the grocery store 15 miles down the highway. Most of them barely looked at her before shaking their heads. "Sorry, we're fully staffed. Not hiring right now. You can leave an application, but we're not expecting any openings." The few that seemed interested changed their tune the moment she couldn't provide a permanent address, or a phone number that wasn't a prepaid burner, or references from employers who'd gone out of business or couldn't remember her. She tried the day labor places too, standing in parking lots at 5 a.m. with dozens of other desperate people hoping to get picked for construction cleanup or warehouse work or whatever else nobody else wanted to do. Some days she got lucky, 8 hours of back-breaking work for $50 cash. Most days she didn't. On those days she collected cans. It was humiliating at first. Digging through trash bins, hauling garbage bags full of aluminum to the recycling center, counting out pennies like they were gold coins. But humiliation faded fast when you were hungry. When your kid was hungry. 13 pounds, the guy at the recycling center said, weighing her bag. "That's $5.85, less than she'd hoped." It was always less than she'd hoped. She took the crumpled bills and walked back to the motel, calculating how many days she could stretch it. Ben spent most of his time in room 7, doing his schoolwork and drawing in his notebook. He'd always loved drawing. Back when they had a normal life. God, that phrase felt like a joke now. He'd cover the walls of his bedroom with sketches. Buildings, floor plans, maps of imaginary cities with train lines and highways and little neighborhoods where people lived happy, stable lives. Now his drawings were different, smaller, more detailed. The motel, rendered from every possible angle. The highway at night, with headlights cutting through the darkness. The view from their window, parking lot. Trees, endless gray sky, and blueprints. Always blueprints. "What's that one?" Claire asked one evening, looking over his shoulder. "The motel. I'm mapping it." "Mapping it?" "Yeah, like where everything is. The rooms, the office, the utility closets." He pointed to a section of his drawing. "There's a storage room behind the office. I saw Mrs. Eleanor go in there once. She had to move a bunch of boxes to even open the door." "Why do you care about the storage room?" He shrugged. "I just like knowing where everything is. It makes me feel safer." Claire's heart cracked a little at that. Her 10-year-old son, finding safety in floor plans because he couldn't find it anywhere else. "That's a good drawing, baby." "Thanks, Mom." Eleanor Whitman had run the Silver Pines Motel for 40 years. She and her husband Harold had bought it in 1982, back when Route 17 was a major thoroughfare and the motel actually turned a profit. Those days were long gone. The highway had been rerouted, the traffic had dried up, and most of the rooms sat empty month after month. But Eleanor stayed. She lived in a small apartment behind the front office. Claire would see her sometimes through the window, sitting in a worn armchair, watching TV, or doing crossword puzzles. Always alone. "Your husband," Claire asked one day, "is he?" "Harold passed 14 years ago." Eleanor's voice was matter-of-fact, but her eyes went somewhere far away. "Heart attack. Right there in the office, middle of a Tuesday afternoon." "I'm sorry, don't be. We had 42 good years. That's more than most people get." Claire thought about her own marriage. 12 years that had ended with a suitcase and a door closing. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I guess it is." Eleanor looked at her for a long moment, those sharp old eyes seeing too much, as always. "You're running out of money." It wasn't a question. Claire didn't answer, didn't have to. "The church I told you about. They need volunteers for their clothing drive. It's not paid work, but they'll give you a hot meal, and sometimes there's extra food you can take home. Better than nothing." "Thank you. And there's a woman in town, Margaret Chen. She runs a cleaning service. Tell her Eleanor sent you. She might have work. Why are you helping us?" Eleanor was quiet for a moment, then she said, "Because I know what it's like, to be invisible, to have everyone look right through you like you're not even there." She turned back to her crossword puzzle. "Now go call Margaret before I change my mind about giving you her number." Margaret Chen did have work, sort of. It's not steady, she warned Claire over the phone. I call you when I have extra jobs, maybe 2-3 times a week if you're lucky. $15 an hour, cash. I'll take it. You got transportation? I have a car. Good. I'll be in touch. It wasn't much, but it was something. Claire hung up and immediately did the math. If Margaret called her 3 times a week, if each job was 3 or 4 hours, she might be able to make $150 weekly. Not enough to save anything, but maybe enough to keep the room. She was wrong, of course. The calls came twice a week, sometimes only once. The jobs were short. 2 hours here, 90 minutes there. By the end of her second week at the Silver Pines, Claire had earned exactly $67 from Margaret's cleaning service, plus $23 from recycling cans, plus $40 from a day labor gig loading furniture onto a moving truck, $130 total, $45 short of another week's rent. She stood outside the motel office, staring at the door, trying to figure out what to say, how to explain, how to ask for more time when she had no guarantee she could ever pay. Ben was in the room, doing homework. He didn't know how bad things had gotten. She'd made sure of that. She pushed open the door. Eleanor looked up from her crossword. One glance at Claire's face and she set down her pencil. How short are you? $45. Maybe a little more. When can you have it? I don't know, a week maybe, if I get enough work. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. Claire could feel the rejection coming. The speech about how she was sorry, how she wished she could help, how business was business and nothing personal. Instead, Eleanor said, "Pay me what you have, the rest can wait. I can't ask you to." "You're not asking, I'm offering." She held out her hand. "The $130, give it here." Claire handed over the crumpled bills, her entire net worth, minus about $12 in coins. "That buys you another week. Same deal next week. Pay what you can, owe me the rest." Eleanor wrote something in her ledger. "We'll figure it out." "Why are you doing this?" "Because turning out a mother and her kid in the middle of November isn't something I'm willing to do." She looked up, and her eyes were fierce. "I've seen enough hard luck in my life to know it can happen to anyone. Today it's you. Tomorrow it might be someone else. We help each other or we don't. There's no middle ground." Claire didn't know what to say. She'd spent months being invisible, being dismissed, being looked through. This woman, this stranger, was the first person in a long time who'd actually seen her. "Thank you," she finally managed. "I'll pay you back, every cent." "I know you will." November turned into December. The cold came early that year, hard and bitter. Claire bought blankets from Goodwill and hung them over the windows for extra insulation. She taught Ben how to layer his clothes, how to keep his feet warm with plastic bags inside his shoes, how to conserve body heat by curling up small when he slept. They went to the church dinners every Wednesday, First Baptist, just like Eleanor said. The people there were kind, asking no questions, offering second helpings without being asked. Claire always saved part of her portion for the next day. Christmas was approaching, and she had no idea what to do about it. "Mom," Ben said one evening, "I don't need presents this year." They were sitting on one of the beds, sharing a can of soup heated on the hot plate. "What are you talking about?" "Christmas. I know we don't have money." He stirred his soup, not meeting her eyes. "I'm okay with it." "Really?" Claire set down her spoon. "Ben, it's fine. I'd rather have a room than presents anyway." Her heart broke a little more. It seemed to do that a lot these days. "Let's not worry about Christmas yet," she said. "We'll figure something out. We always do." He nodded, but she could see he didn't believe her. She didn't blame him. She wasn't sure she believed herself. The night everything changed was December 14th. Claire would remember that date for the rest of her life. The way the rain came down in sheets, the way the wind rattled the windows of room 7, the way she couldn't sleep, lying awake at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, listening to Ben's breathing in the bed next to her. She was thinking about money, as always. They were $67 behind on rent now, with no clear path to catching up. Margaret's calls had slowed even further. The holidays meant people were cleaning their own houses, not hiring services. The day labor dried up completely. Even the cans were harder to find. competition from other desperate people picking over the same trash bins. She was running out of options, running out of time, and then she heard it. A crash, loud, glass shattering, something heavy hitting the floor, coming from downstairs from Eleanor's office. Claire sat bolt upright, heart pounding. She was out of bed before she even thought about it. Feet hitting the cold floor, hands grabbing her jacket. Ben stirred but didn't wake. She ran down the stairs, rain already soaking through her thin pajamas the moment she stepped outside. The office door was right there. She grabbed the handle, locked. "Eleanor?" She pounded on the door. "Eleanor, are you okay?" "Nothing." She pounded harder. "Eleanor?" Silence, just the rain hammering down and the wind screaming through the parking lot. Claire's stomach dropped. She ran around the side of the building, slipping on the wet concrete, not caring. The office had a window on the east side. She'd seen Eleanor open it sometimes to let in fresh air. The curtain was mostly drawn, but not all the way. A gap, maybe 6 inches. Claire pressed her face against the glass, cupping her hands around her eyes to block the rain. Her breath caught. Inside, a tall metal shelf had toppled over, papers and boxes scattered everywhere. "Oh God, Eleanor." Claire yanked at the window. Locked. Of course it was locked. She looked around frantically. There, leaning against the wall by the garden beds, Eleanor's gardening tools, a shovel, a rake, a small spade. She grabbed the shovel, and then she hesitated. The window, she'd have to break it. That was property damage. What if Eleanor was fine? What if she'd just fallen and was getting up right now? What if Claire broke in and Eleanor called the police, and she ended up in jail and Ben ended up alone but that shape on the floor hadn't moved, not even a little. Claire thought about the money she didn't have, the rent she couldn't pay, the 1,000 ways this could go wrong. Then she thought about Eleanor's sharp eyes and her crossword puzzles, and the way she'd said, "I know what it's like to be invisible." She swung the shovel. The glass exploded inward. Claire knocked out the jagged edges with the shovel handle, then hauled herself through the frame, feeling a shard slice across her palm. She didn't care. "Eleanor." She dropped to her knees beside the old woman. The shelf had fallen, must have fallen on her, or she'd grabbed it trying to steady herself, and brought the whole thing down. There was blood, a lot of it, pooling beneath Eleanor's head where she'd hit the corner of the desk on the way down. "Eleanor? Eleanor? Can you hear me?" Nothing. No response. Claire pressed 2 fingers against her neck, searching for a pulse. For one horrible moment she couldn't find it. Then there, faint, thready, but there, she grabbed her phone and dialed 911. "I need an ambulance. Silver Pines Motel on Route 17. A woman fell and hit her head. She's unconscious and bleeding badly." The dispatcher asked questions. Claire answered them, her voice steady, even though her hands were shaking. She found a clean towel in Eleanor's bathroom and pressed it against the wound, trying to slow the bleeding. "Stay on the line, ma'am. Help is on the way." "How long?" 15 to 20 minutes. "Can you tell if she's breathing?" Claire watched Eleanor's chest rise, fall, barely visible, but there. "Yes, she's breathing." "Good. Keep pressure on the wound, and keep her warm if you can." 20 minutes. It felt like 20 hours. Claire talked to Eleanor the whole time, even though she couldn't hear her. She told her about Ben, about the library job she used to have, about the books she loved, about anything and everything, because the sound of her own voice was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. "You're going to be okay. You hear me? You're not dying in this office. Not tonight. Not on my watch." At some point, Ben appeared at the broken window. He was in his pajamas, his stuffed dog clutched against his chest, eyes huge in his pale face. "Mom, what happened?" "Mrs. Eleanor fell." "Go back to the room, baby." "Is she going to die?" "No, the ambulance is coming." "Go back to the room and wait for me." He didn't move, just stood there in the rain, watching, too scared to leave but too smart to argue. Claire went back to pressing the towel against Eleanor's head. The blood had soaked through. She grabbed another towel, layered it on top. "Come on, Eleanor, stay with me. You've survived 40 years in this place. You're not checking out now." The ambulance came at 2:47 a.m. 2 paramedics, moving fast, professional. "What happened?" I heard a crash, found her like this, the shelf fell on her. I've been keeping pressure on the wound. They took over, loading Eleanor onto a stretcher, asking Claire questions about her medical history that Claire couldn't answer. Are you family? No, just I'm staying here, at the motel. They exchanged a look. Claire knew what they were thinking. Homeless woman, rundown motel, broken window, probably a burglary gone wrong. I broke the window to get in, she said flatly. She was on the floor. I didn't know what else to do. The older paramedic's expression softened slightly. You did the right thing. Another 10 minutes and it might have been too late. We're taking her to County General, the younger one said. You can follow if you want. She couldn't. She had no gas money and Ben to take care of. But she knew someone who worked there. I'll make some calls, Claire said. Just please take care of her. Claire watched the ambulance pull away, lights flashing, siren wailing. Then she stood alone in the rain, covered in Eleanor Whitman's blood, her hand still bleeding from the broken glass, and pulled out her phone. She scrolled through her contacts until she found the name. Linda Chen. They'd met at a shelter 2 years ago, back when Claire still had a car and Linda was working double shifts to pay off her nursing school loans. Claire had watched Linda's daughter for 3 nights straight while Linda took her board exams. No questions asked, no payment expected. Linda had passed, got her RN license, got a job at County General. She'd told Claire once. If you ever need anything at all, you call me. Claire had never called, pride maybe, or stubbornness. But now she hit the call button. It rang 4 times, then a groggy voice. Hello, Linda, it's Claire. Claire Reynolds, a pause, then more alert. Claire, it's 3 in the morning, what's wrong? I need a favor, a big one, she explained quickly. The motel, Eleanor, the ambulance. The fact that Eleanor had no family, no one to advocate for her, no one to make sure she wasn't just another old woman lost in the system. I can't be there, Claire said, her voice cracking for the first time. I have Ben, I have to keep this place running or we'll both be on the street again. But she saved us, Linda. She gave us a roof when we had nothing. I can't just. Claire, stop. Linda's voice was firm but kind. What's her name? Eleanor Whitman. I'm working a day shift tomorrow. I'll check on her, make sure she's getting good care. I'll call you with updates. Linda, you watched my daughter for 3 days so I could take the most important test of my life. You think I forgot that? A soft laugh. This is nothing, go take care of your boy. I've got Eleanor. Claire hung up and stood there for a long moment, rain streaming down her face, mixing with tears she hadn't realized she was crying. Then she went to find something to cover the broken window. Eleanor was in the hospital for 18 days. Linda kept her promise. She called Claire every evening with updates, first from the ICU, then from the recovery ward. Fractured skull, internal bleeding, surgery to relieve the pressure, touch and go for the first 3 days, but Eleanor was tough. Tougher than anyone expected. She asked about you today, Linda reported on day 7. Wanted to know who broke her window. Claire laughed despite herself. What did you tell her? I told her it was the woman who saved her life. She said, and I quote, tell her she's paying for that window. That sounds like Eleanor. She also said to tell you not to let anyone steal the cash box. Apparently it's hidden under a loose floorboard behind the desk. Of course it is. During those 18 days Claire did something she'd never done before. She took charge of the Silver Pines. It wasn't planned. The first morning after Eleanor's accident, a guest showed up wanting to check in. Claire was in the office boarding up the broken window. Someone had to do it, and the guest asked if there was anyone working the desk. The owner had an accident, Claire said. She's in the hospital. So what? The place is closed. Claire looked at him, looked at the key rack behind the counter, looked at the rate card taped next to the register. No, she said slowly, it's not closed, let me get you a room. She didn't know what she was doing at first, but she figured it out. Check-ins, check-outs, cleaning rooms when guests left, making sure the utilities stayed on, answering the phone when it rang, which wasn't often. Ben helped. He was good at it, actually. His methodical nature and attention to detail made him perfect for tasks like inventory and organization. He kept track of which rooms needed cleaning, which supplies were running low, which guests had special requests. Mom, room 4 is out of towels again. I'll get some from the storage closet. Also, the guy in room 9 wants to know if we have any decaf coffee. Tell him we don't, but there's a gas station about a mile down the road. They made a good team. When Eleanor finally came back, she looked 10 years older. The bandage was still wrapped around her head, and she walked slowly, carefully, like someone who wasn't sure her legs would hold her. Claire helped her into the office chair, brought her a cup of tea, and waited. You've been running the place. It wasn't a question. Someone had to. You could have robbed me blind, taken whatever you wanted and disappeared. I thought about it. Claire smiled slightly, for about half a second. Eleanor studied her for a long moment. Those sharp eyes dulled by injury but still seeing everything. The hospital told me what you did. How you found me. How you broke my window with my own shovel. A ghost of a smile. They said I would have died. Another 10 minutes and I would have been gone. I just did what anyone would do. No, you did what most people wouldn't. Eleanor's voice cracked slightly. Most people would have walked right past that window. Would have told themselves it wasn't their problem. But you didn't. She paused, looking around the office, at the new glass in the window, at the repaired shelf, at the neat stacks of paperwork Claire had organized while she was gone. And then you kept this place running. For 18 days, while I was lying in a hospital bed, some woman I barely know was taking care of everything I've spent 40 years building. Linda helped, Claire said. My friend. The nurse. She looked after you when I couldn't. I know, she told me. Eleanor reached out and took Claire's hand. You have good people in your life, Claire Reynolds. Even when you think you have nothing, you have that. Claire didn't know what to say. I just did what anyone would do. No, you did what most people wouldn't. Eleanor's voice cracked slightly. Most people would have walked right past that door. Would have told themselves it wasn't their problem. But you didn't. Claire didn't know what to say. She looked at her hands, at the floor, at anything but Eleanor's face. There's a storage room behind this office. Eleanor said. Harold used it for his files. It's got a bed in it. He used to sleep there sometimes when we had a full house and needed every room. There's a bathroom too, and enough space for 2 people if they don't mind being cozy. Claire looked up. 6 months, Eleanor said. Free. After that, you pay what you can when you can. She held up a hand before Claire could speak. I'm not doing this out of charity. I'm doing it because I need help running this place, and you've already proven you can do it. Consider it a job if that makes it easier to accept. Claire felt tears prickling at her eyes. Eleanor, don't thank me, just say yes. Yes. They moved into the storage room that afternoon. It wasn't much, maybe 12 feet by 12 feet, with a concrete floor and a single window that didn't open all the way. The bed Eleanor mentioned was really just an old cot with a thin mattress. The bathroom was tiny, a toilet, a sink, and a shower that dribbled more than sprayed, but it was theirs. Rent-free. For 6 months Ben explored every inch of it within the first hour. There's a lot of stuff in here, Mom. Old boxes and files and things. Don't touch anything. This is all Mrs. Eleanor's. It's Harold's actually. Eleanor had appeared in the doorway, moving slowly but steadily. He was a bit of a pack rat, kept records of everything. The motel, his work, his projects. I haven't had the heart to go through any of it since he passed. Ben was looking at a stack of filing cabinets pushed against one wall. What did he do? For work, I mean. He was an engineer, structural engineer. Worked for a construction company for 30 years before we bought this place. Eleanor's voice softened. He was a good man. Believed in doing things right, even when it cost him. What do you mean? But Eleanor just shook her head. Old stories. Nothing for you to worry about. She looked at Claire. Make yourselves comfortable. I'll be in the office if you need anything. She left. Ben turned to Claire with that look on his face. The one that meant he'd latched onto something and wouldn't let go until he understood it. What do you think she meant? About doing things right even when it cost him. I don't know, baby. Come on, let's get unpacked. They settled into a new routine. Claire worked the front desk during the day while Eleanor rested. She learned the ins and outs of running a motel. How to check the credit cards, how to handle complaints, how to spot guests who might cause trouble. It wasn't hard, just tedious. Most days there were only 2 or 3 check-ins. Ben continued his homeschooling, but now he had a real desk to work at, and a real bed to sleep in. He seemed lighter somehow, happier, less burdened by the constant uncertainty that had defined their lives for the past year. And he kept exploring. "Mom, look at this." It was a week after they'd moved in. Ben was sitting on the floor next to one of Harold's filing cabinets, surrounded by yellowed papers. "I thought I told you not to touch." "I know, but the drawer was open and some stuff fell out and I was just trying to put it back and then I saw this." He held up a photograph. "Look." Claire took it. The image showed a younger Eleanor, maybe 40 years ago, standing next to a tall man with a kind face and serious eyes. They were in front of a building that Claire didn't recognize. "That must be Harold. Turn it over." Claire did. On the back, in neat handwriting, Harold and Eleanor, opening day, Silver Pines Motel, 1982. "We're going to change things here." "Change what things?" Ben asked. "I don't know, maybe they were just excited about their new business." But Ben wasn't satisfied. He never was when there was a mystery to solve. "There's more stuff in this cabinet," he said. "Files and notebooks and things. Some of them have weird labels, like one of them just says evidences in big letters." Claire's heart skipped. "Put that back. Right now." But Ben now, he put it back, but his eyes were still on the cabinet. That night, after he was asleep, Claire found herself standing in front of the same filing cabinet. Evidence. She didn't open it. Not yet, but she knew, somehow, that she would. Days turned into weeks. Christmas came and went. Eleanor bought Ben a set of colored pencils and a new sketchbook, and Claire managed to scrape together enough for a second-hand book about famous buildings that made him literally jump with joy. January brought the coldest weather Claire had ever experienced. The motel's heating system struggled, and she spent hours learning how to nurse it back to life whenever it threatened to give up entirely. Eleanor was recovering, slowly. She could work the desk for a few hours each day now, though she tired quickly and had to rest often. The doctor said she was lucky. The skull fracture could have caused permanent damage, but somehow it hadn't. "It's because of you," she told Claire one evening. "The quick response, the pressure on the wound. You gave me a chance. I just did what anyone would do. You keep saying that. And you keep being wrong." Eleanor smiled slightly. "Has anyone ever told you that you have a hard time accepting gratitude?" Claire laughed despite herself. "Maybe once or twice." It was Ben who found it. Of course it was Ben. With his maps and his floor plans, and his obsessive need to understand every inch of every space he inhabited. It happened on a Tuesday in late January. Claire was working the front desk, Eleanor was resting in her apartment. Ben was supposed to be doing math homework in the storage room. Mom, come here. Now." Something in his voice made Claire move fast. She found him standing behind the filing cabinets, which he'd somehow managed to shift away from the wall. "Ben, what are you?" "Listen." He knocked on the wall, a hollow sound. "It's empty behind here. Like there's a space." Claire's mind flashed to all the old stories about hidden rooms and secret compartments. She'd always dismissed them as fiction. But Ben's knock had sounded distinctly hollow. "Move back." She ran her fingers along the wall. It was covered in cheap wood paneling, the kind that was popular decades ago. Most of it was solidly attached, but in one section she felt a slight give, a gap where the panel met the wall. "There's something here. I told you." Claire hesitated. This was Eleanor's property, Eleanor's husband's secrets. She had no right to, but Ben was already pulling at the loose panel. It came away with a crack of aged adhesive, revealing a narrow space behind the wall, maybe 2 feet deep, pitch black. "Do you have a flashlight?" Ben handed her his phone with the flashlight on. Claire shined it into the gap. Her breath caught. Inside the hidden space were 3 items: an old leather suitcase, covered in decades of dust, an external hard drive, surprisingly modern compared to everything else, likely added years later, when Harold had begun digitizing his records. "What is all that?" Ben whispered. Claire reached in and pulled out the envelope first. The handwriting was shaky, clearly written by an elderly or ill hand. "If someone finds this, please do what I couldn't." They brought everything to Eleanor. The old woman's face went white when she saw the suitcase. "That's Harold's." It was hidden behind the wall, in the storage room. There was a false panel. Eleanor's hands trembled as she reached for the envelope. She stared at the handwriting for a long moment, and Claire saw her eyes fill with tears. "I didn't know. I thought he destroyed everything." She looked up. "After he died, I looked for it. I searched every inch of this place. I thought he'd given up, thrown it all away, but he hid it instead." "Eleanor, what was this? What did Harold hide?" The old woman was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Do you know how my husband really died?" Claire shook her head. "The official story is that he had a heart attack, right there in the office, middle of a Tuesday afternoon. That part is true." Eleanor's jaw tightened. "What isn't true is that it was natural causes. Harold was healthy as a horse, never had a heart problem in his life." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that 3 days before he died, a man came to see him. A man from a company called Hale Industries. They talked in the office for about an hour. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see Harold's face through the window. I'd never seen him look so scared." Claire felt a chill that had nothing to do with the January cold. "What did they want?" "They wanted him to stay quiet." Eleanor opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Harold was a structural engineer. He worked for a company that built affordable housing. Apartment complexes, mostly, funded by government contracts. Big projects, lots of money involved. She pulled out a sheaf of papers, yellowed with age but still legible. "About 30 years ago, Harold discovered something. The company he worked for was cutting corners, using substandard materials, falsifying inspection reports. He documented everything, photographs, memos, financial records. He was going to blow the whistle." "What happened?" "The company was owned by a man named Richard Hale." Eleanor's voice hardened. "Hale Industries, you might have heard of them. They're one of the biggest real estate developers in the region now. Back then they were just getting started, and Richard Hale didn't appreciate having a mid-level engineer threaten to destroy everything he'd built." Claire looked at the papers in Eleanor's hands. "So Hale had him killed." "I could never prove it. The death certificate says heart attack, but I know what I know." She spread the documents on the desk. Harold kept copies of everything, all the evidence he'd gathered. He was supposed to meet with a reporter the week after he died. The meeting never happened. "And you've had this all along?" "No, that's what I'm telling you. I thought it was gone. After Harold died, men came. They searched the office, the motel, everywhere. They said they were from the city doing a routine inspection, but I knew better. They took boxes of files. I assumed they'd found everything." She looked at the hidden space behind the wall. "But Harold was smarter than they knew. He hid the real evidence where no one would find it. And then he died before he could tell me where it was." Ben had been silent this whole time, his eyes huge as he listened. Now he spoke up. "What was the evidence about? Like what exactly did the company do wrong?" Eleanor hesitated. Then she opened the suitcase. Inside were files, dozens of them, photographs, documents. Most of it had been sealed in plastic sleeves and airtight boxes, yellowed at the edges but intact. A thick folder labeled inspection reports, another labeled incident reports, and a smaller folder, held together with a rubber band, labeled deaths. "That one," Eleanor said quietly. "Open that one." Claire did. Inside were newspaper clippings, 7 of them, each one describing an accident at an apartment building, a collapse, a fire, a structural failure, each one listing casualties, each one from a building constructed by Hale Industries. 7 accidents. Eleanor said. 15 people dead, all of them in buildings that Harold inspected, buildings he knew were dangerous, buildings he tried to warn people about. And no one listened. Hale had friends everywhere. City council, police department, building inspectors. By the time Harold gathered enough evidence to prove what was happening, it was too late. The buildings were occupied. People were living in death traps. Her voice broke. And then Harold died, and I was too scared to do anything. So I stayed silent. For 25 years I stayed silent. Claire didn't sleep that night. She lay in the darkness of the storage room, listening to Ben's breathing, thinking about what Eleanor had told her. 7 accidents, 15 deaths, a quarter-century of silence. And now the evidence was in their hands. What were they supposed to do with it? Part of her wanted to pretend she'd never found it, put everything back behind the wall, patch up the paneling, forget it existed. She had enough problems without taking on a decades-old conspiracy involving one of the most powerful men in the region. But then she thought about Eleanor, about the guilt she'd carried for 25 years, about Harold who died trying to do the right thing. And she thought about the 15 people who'd lost their lives in buildings that should have been condemned. Someone had to speak for them. Someone had to tell the truth. The question was, did it have to be her? The next morning, she asked Eleanor a question. Did Harold have family, kids, siblings, anyone who might want to know about this? Eleanor nodded slowly. He had a daughter, Julia, from his first marriage. She paused. They were estranged. Harold's first wife left him when Julia was young, and the relationship never recovered. I haven't spoken to her since the funeral. Do you know where she is now? Last I heard she works for the city records department or something like that. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. Why? Because if we're going to do anything with this evidence, she should be part of it. It's her father's legacy. You want to get involved in this? Claire looked at her hands, rough hands. Workers' hands. The hands of a woman who'd spent the last year and a half fighting just to survive. I've been invisible for a long time, she said quietly. People look right through me. They see a homeless woman, a nobody, someone who doesn't matter. And most of the time I accept it. Most of the time I keep my head down and do what I need to do to get through the day. She looked up at Eleanor. But this matters. What Harold found, what he tried to do, it matters. And if I walk away from it now, I don't think I could live with myself. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled. A real smile. The first one Claire had seen from her. You remind me of Harold. He used to say the same thing, that some things matter more than playing it safe. Did that work out well for him? No. It got him killed. Eleanor's smile faded. But he would have done it anyway. He always said that silence was just another form of lying. Finding Julia Whitman was easier than Claire expected. A few hours of searching public city directories, archived meeting minutes, and departmental staff listings eventually turned up her name in the city records department, just as Eleanor had said. She was listed as a senior archivist, specializing in property records and building documentation. The irony wasn't lost on Claire. Harold's daughter, working with the same kind of records he tried to expose. She wrote a letter, careful, anonymous, including just enough to get Julia's attention without revealing everything. Your father died trying to tell the truth about Hale Industries. I have evidence he left behind. If you want to know more, meet me at the Central Library, Saturday at 2 p.m. I'll be in the history section with a young boy. She mailed it from a post office 10 miles away, using a stamp she'd bought with cash. Then she waited. Saturday came cold and gray. Claire and Ben arrived at the library an hour early. She'd chosen the location carefully, public enough to be safe, quiet enough for a private conversation. The history section was in the back, away from the main circulation desk. What if she doesn't come? Ben asked. Then we try something else. What if she calls the police? What if she thinks we're crazy? Then we deal with it. Claire squeezed his hand. But I don't think she will. If she's anything like her father, she'll want to know the truth. At 2:15, a woman appeared at the end of the aisle. She was in her late 40s with Harold's serious eyes and a face that looked like it hadn't smiled in a long time. She wore a gray coat and carried a messenger bag that she clutched like a shield. Are you the one who sent the letter? Claire stood. Yes. How do I know this isn't some kind of scam? People try to con me all the time. You know, they hear the name Whitman and think there's money involved. There's no money, just truth. Claire reached into her bag and pulled out a photograph. Harold and Eleanor on opening day 1982. Do you recognize this? Julia's face changed. The suspicion melted into something else. Pain maybe, or grief that had never fully healed. Where did you get that? There's more. A lot more, but not here. Claire glanced around the library. Somewhere private. They went to a coffee shop 3 blocks away. A quiet corner booth, away from the other customers. Ben sat beside Claire, drawing in his notebook, pretending not to listen. Julia stared at the documents spread across the table. Her hands shook as she touched the pages, traced her father's handwriting in the margins. I always knew it wasn't a heart attack, she said softly. My mother told me I was paranoid. Said I was looking for someone to blame because I couldn't accept that he was just gone. She looked up at Claire. But I was right, he was murdered. We can't prove that. Not directly. But we can prove what he was trying to expose. After all this time, Hale Industries is huge now. Richard Hale is one of the most powerful men in the state. He has lawyers, connections, politicians in his pocket. Julia shook her head. What makes you think anyone will listen? Because we have something Hale doesn't know exists. Claire tapped the external hard drive. Everything Harold documented is on here. Every falsified inspection report. Every financial discrepancy. Every connection between Hale Industries and the buildings where people died. It's 30 years old. There's a statute of limitations, not for everything, and even if he never sees the inside of a prison, he can still be held accountable. Publicly, financially, his reputation, his legacy, his company, all of it built on the bodies of innocent people. Claire leaned forward. Don't you think they deserve to be remembered? Don't you think their families deserve to know the truth? Julia was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. What do you need from me? Over the next few weeks they built their case. Julia, with her access to city records, was able to verify Harold's documentation. She found matching files in the archives. Original inspection reports that had been amended after they were submitted. Building permits issued despite safety concerns. Complaints from residents that had been ignored or buried. It's all here, she told Claire, spreading papers across Eleanor's desk. Everything my father said. He wasn't paranoid. He was right about all of it. Ben helped too in his way. He organized files, created timelines, mapped out connections between different buildings and incidents. His visual mind was perfect for seeing patterns that others missed. Look, he said one evening, holding up a chart he'd made. These 3 buildings, they were all inspected in the same month. And they all had accidents within 2 years of that. Same kind of accidents too. Structural failures. Eleanor watched them work, her face a mixture of pride and sorrow. Harold would be happy, she said quietly, to know that someone finally cared enough to finish what he started. But they couldn't do it alone. They needed help. Legal help, professional help, the kind of resources that homeless women and retired motel owners didn't have access to. Julia knew a lawyer, independent, not connected to any firm that Hale Industries might have influence over. Her name is Rachel Torres. She specializes in whistleblower cases. If anyone can figure out how to use this evidence, it's her. They met at Rachel's office, a small suite above a hardware store. The lawyer was in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. Let me get this straight, she said after hearing their story. You have 30-year-old evidence of corporate negligence that resulted in multiple deaths. The perpetrator is one of the most powerful businessmen in the state. The statute of limitations has expired on most criminal charges. And you want to, what exactly? We want justice, Julia said. We want the truth to come out. Justice is a nice word. It doesn't pay my bills. Rachel held up a hand before anyone could object. That said, I've been waiting 20 years for someone to bring me a case against Richard Hale. He's a monster, and everyone in this business knows it. But no one's ever had enough evidence to touch him. We have evidence. You have evidence that he cut corners and people died. That's not the same as proving he murdered anyone. Rachel flipped through the files, but it might be enough for a civil case. Wrongful death suits filed by the families of the victims. If we can get enough of them to join together, we might be able to force a settlement, or at least drag him into court and expose what he did. What about criminal charges? The murder, your father's death, Rachel said, looking at Julia. We can't prove that. Not with what we have. But there might be other angles. Financial fraud, conspiracy, obstruction of justice. I'd need to dig deeper. She smiled grimly, and we'd need to find someone willing to go on record, someone who was there who can testify to what Hale knew and when he knew it. Where do we find someone like that? Leave that to me. Rachel Torres was good at her job. Within a month she'd identified 6 families of victims who were willing to join the lawsuit. She'd found a forensic accountant to analyze the financial records. She'd contacted a journalist at the Tribune, a guy named Marcus Webb who had a reputation for taking on powerful interests. And she'd found a witness. His name was Peter Crane. He'd worked for Hale Industries in the 1990s as a building inspector, one of the people responsible for signing off on the falsified reports. He'd left the company years ago, moved across the country, and spent 2 decades trying to forget what he'd been part of. I knew it was wrong, he told them, his face gray with guilt. I knew those buildings weren't safe, but Hale paid well, and I had a family to support, and I told myself it wasn't my problem. It's not too late to make it right, Claire said. Yes it is. People died because of what I did, because of what I didn't do. He shook his head. Coming forward now won't bring them back. No, but it might prevent it from happening again, and it might give their families some peace. Crane was silent for a long time, then he nodded. Okay, I'll testify. Whatever you need. The story broke on a Sunday morning. Marcus Webb's article was comprehensive, detailed, devastating. It laid out 30 years of corporate negligence, falsified safety reports, and suspicious deaths. It named names, it showed photographs, it quoted Peter Crane extensively, and it put Richard Hale's face on the front page, under a headline that read, "Real Estate Tycoon Connected to Decades of Deadly Cover-Ups." Within hours the story was everywhere. Other news outlets picked it up. Social media exploded. The families of the victims started giving interviews, telling their stories, demanding accountability. Richard Hale's lawyer issued a statement calling the allegations baseless and defamatory, but the damage was done. The civil suit was filed 3 days later. Rachel Torres held a press conference outside the courthouse, flanked by family members of the victims. Claire watched from the back of the crowd, Ben beside her, feeling like she was witnessing something historic. "This is not about money," Rachel said to the assembled reporters. "This is about accountability. For 30 years Richard Hale has profited from buildings that were never safe to live in. 15 people died because of his greed. Today we're asking the courts to hold him responsible." Questions flew from the press. Rachel answered them calmly, confidently. Behind her the family members stood in a line, their faces a mixture of grief and determination. Claire recognized some of them from the meetings they'd had over the past few weeks. There was Maria Gonzalez, whose mother had died in a fire in 2003. There was David Chen, whose sister had been killed in a building collapse. There was Angela Morrison, whose husband had fallen through a weakened floor and broken his neck. 15 people, 30 years. Finally someone was listening. Richard Hale didn't go down without a fight. His lawyers filed motion after motion trying to get the case dismissed. They argued that the statute of limitations had expired. They argued that the evidence was too old to be reliable. They argued that Peter Crane's testimony was tainted by his own complicity. The judge rejected the most critical arguments, allowing the case to proceed. "The victims in this case never had a voice," she wrote in her ruling. "The evidence presented suggests a systematic pattern of corporate negligence and cover-up that deprived them of their right to safety in their own homes. This court will not deny them justice a second time." The trial was set for September. In the months leading up to the trial, Claire's life transformed in ways she never could have imagined. She was still working at the Silver Pines, still living in the storage room with Ben. But now she was also part of something bigger. Meetings with lawyers, interviews with journalists, strategy sessions with the victim families, and she was no longer invisible. People recognized her on the street. Reporters asked for her story. The woman who'd found the evidence. The homeless mother who'd uncovered a 30-year conspiracy. She hated the attention, but she understood why it mattered. "You're the human face of this case," Rachel told her. "A regular person who saw something wrong and refused to stay silent. That's powerful, that resonates with people. I didn't do it for the attention. I know. That's what makes it work." The trial lasted 2 weeks. Claire was there every day, sitting in the gallery with Ben and Eleanor and Julia. She watched as Rachel Torres dismantled Richard Hale's defense piece by piece. She watched as witness after witness testified about unsafe buildings, ignored complaints and families destroyed by preventable tragedies. And she watched Richard Hale himself, sitting at the defense table with his expensive lawyers and his tailored suit, his face a mask of arrogant indifference. He was 74 years old now, white hair, sharp eyes, the kind of man who'd spent his entire life believing the rules didn't apply to him. On the 8th day of the trial, Peter Crane took the stand. He was nervous. Claire could see his hands shaking from across the courtroom, but his voice was steady as he described what he'd witnessed. The falsified reports, the orders from above to sign off on buildings he knew were dangerous, the culture of silence and complicity that had allowed it all to continue. I knew people might die, he said, his voice cracking, but I told myself it wasn't my responsibility, that I was just doing my job, that someone else would catch it before anything bad happened. And did they? Rachel asked. Did someone else catch it? No, because we were all doing the same thing. We were all looking the other way. He looked directly at Hale, because that's what he wanted, that's what he paid us for. The defense tried to discredit him. They brought up his own complicity, suggested he was only testifying to save himself. But Rachel had anticipated this. Mr. Crane has already admitted his role in these events, she said in her redirect. He's not here to escape responsibility. He's here because he wants to tell the truth he should have told 30 years ago. The question isn't whether he was wrong. The question is whether the man who created that culture of corruption will finally be held accountable. The verdict came on a Friday afternoon. The courtroom was packed. Claire sat between Eleanor and Julia, holding both their hands. Ben was on Julia's other side, his sketchbook closed for once, his attention fully focused on the judge. In the matter of Gonzalez et al. Versus Hale Industries and Richard Hale personally, Claire's heart pounded in her ears. This court finds for the plaintiffs on all counts. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Behind Claire someone started crying. Julia squeezed her hand so hard it hurt. The judge continued, her voice cutting through the noise. The evidence presented in this trial demonstrates a clear and systematic pattern of corporate negligence, fraud and willful disregard for human life. The defendant, through his company and his direct actions, created conditions that led to the deaths of 15 individuals over a period of 3 decades. She looked directly at Richard Hale. While criminal charges are beyond the scope of this proceeding, this court has the authority to impose civil penalties. The defendant is hereby ordered to pay compensatory damages of $18 million to the families of the victims, to be distributed according to the schedule outlined in Exhibit 47. More noise from the gallery. Rachel Torres was smiling, her professional composure finally cracking. Additionally, the judge continued, the defendant is ordered to fund the establishment of a building safety oversight foundation, to be named in honor of Harold Whitman, whose efforts to expose these practices cost him his life. The initial endowment shall be $5 million, with ongoing contributions to be determined by the court-appointed administrator. Richard Hale sat motionless, his face finally showing something other than arrogance. He looked old, defeated. Finally, the court notes that the defendant has shown no remorse for his actions and has actively attempted to obstruct justice throughout these proceedings. While incarceration is not within this court's authority, the public record of this trial will speak for itself. The gavel came down. Court is adjourned. Outside the courthouse, chaos. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. The victim families embraced each other, tears streaming down their faces. Rachel Torres gave a statement on the steps, her voice calm and measured despite the emotion of the moment. Claire stood apart from it all, watching. Ben found her there, slipping his hand into hers. "We did it, Mom." "Yeah, baby, we did." "Do you feel different?" She thought about it. Did she feel different? She was still the same person she'd been 18 months ago, unemployed, struggling, living day to day. The verdict didn't change that. The compensation money was going to the families as it should. She wasn't going to suddenly become rich or secure or stable, but something had shifted. Something inside her. "I feel like I matter," she said finally. "Like what I do makes a difference. I haven't felt that way in a long time." Ben nodded, as if this made perfect sense. "Mrs. Eleanor says you're a hero. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who refused to stay quiet. Isn't that the same thing? Claire smiled. Maybe. I don't know. Julia appeared beside them, her eyes red from crying, but her face brighter than Claire had ever seen it. My father would have loved you, she said. Both of you. He always said that courage wasn't about not being afraid. It was about being afraid and doing it anyway. I was terrified, Claire admitted. The whole time. I know. Julia smiled. That's what made it count. Richard Hale resigned from his company the following week. The board of directors, facing mounting public pressure and the threat of additional lawsuits, voted unanimously to remove his name from all company properties and initiatives. Not everything vanished overnight. Money and influence rarely do. But the image he'd spent a lifetime building never recovered. His philanthropic foundation dissolved. His country club membership was revoked. His wife, silent throughout the trial, filed for divorce. He died 8 months later. Heart attack, the official report said. Alone in his mansion, surrounded by the remnants of an empire built on lies and bodies, Claire didn't feel sorry for him. She didn't feel anything at all. The months after the trial brought changes. Eleanor sold the Silver Pines, not to a developer who'd tear it down, but to a non-profit that planned to convert it into transitional housing for families in crisis. It's what Harold would have wanted, she said. A place for people who have nowhere else to go. She moved into a small apartment in town, close to Julia. The two of them had become unlikely friends, the widow and the estranged daughter, connected by Harold's memory and the truth they'd helped uncover. Julia used part of her father's posthumous recognition, the foundation named in his honor, the formal acknowledgement from the city, to establish a scholarship fund. For kids like Ben, she said. Kids who are too smart to let circumstances hold them back. And Claire got a job. It wasn't glamorous, part-time position at the downtown library, sorting returns and helping patrons find what they were looking for. The pay was barely enough to cover rent on the tiny apartment they'd found above a laundromat 3 blocks from Ben's new school. But it was enough, more than enough. She had a routine now. Wake up at 6, make breakfast for Ben, walk him to school, take the bus to the library, work until 3, pick Ben up, help with homework, make dinner, watch TV, go to sleep. Simple, ordinary. The kind of life she'd once taken for granted. It felt like a miracle. One evening about a year after the trial, Ben looked up from his homework and asked the question that had been sitting between them for months. Mom, are we okay now, like for real? Claire set down the dish she was washing and turned to face him. What do you mean? I mean, he struggled to find the words. Before everything was scary. We didn't know where we'd sleep or if we'd have food or anything. And now we have an apartment, and you have a job, and I go to school, but is it going to last, or is something bad going to happen again? Claire dried her hands and sat down across from him. I don't know, she said honestly. I can't promise that nothing bad will ever happen again. Life doesn't work that way, but I can promise that whatever happens we'll face it together. We've already survived the worst thing I can imagine. We can survive anything else too, because we're strong, because we have each other. Ben nodded slowly. Then he said something that made Claire's eyes fill with tears. I'm glad you didn't give up, back when things were really bad. I'm glad you kept trying. She reached across the table and took his hand. I couldn't give up. I had you. The last time Claire saw Eleanor was at the dedication ceremony for the Harold Whitman Foundation. It was a warm day in late spring. The event was held at the former Silver Pines, now undergoing renovation. Local politicians gave speeches. The victim families spoke about what the foundation meant to them. Julia unveiled a plaque with Harold's photograph and a quote from his journal. The truth is not something we find, it's something we choose to tell. Eleanor sat in a wheelchair at the front of the crowd, looking frail but peaceful. Claire found her afterward, away from the cameras and the congratulations. How are you feeling, old? Eleanor smiled. But good, better than I've felt in years. She looked at the plaque, at the building, at the gathered crowd. Harold would have been so proud, not of me, of you. You finished what he started, we all did, together. Maybe. Eleanor's eyes met hers. But it started with you. A homeless woman in a motel, willing to do what everyone else was too scared to do. She reached out and squeezed Claire's hand. Don't you ever forget that. Don't you ever let anyone make you feel like you don't matter, because you do. You matter more than you know. Claire didn't know what to say, so she just held Eleanor's hand and watched the sunset over the building where everything had changed. Here's what I want you to understand about this story. It's not about heroes. Claire didn't put on a cape or develop superpowers. She was just a woman, a desperate, scared, ordinary woman, who found something she didn't expect and made a choice about what to do with it. She could have walked away, most people would have, most people do, but she didn't. And because she didn't, 15 families got answers they'd waited decades to hear. A monster got exposed for what he was. A good man's legacy was finally honored. It started with a fall in the dark, and a woman brave enough to open a door. That's it, that's the whole story. No, actually, there's one more thing. A few months after the foundation dedication, Claire was sorting returns at the library when a woman approached the desk. She was young, maybe early 20s, with tired eyes and a toddler on her hip. "Excuse me," she said. "I'm looking for information about services, for people who don't have a place to live." Claire looked at her, really looked. "Follow me," she said. "I know exactly what you need." She spent the next hour helping the woman find resources, shelters, food banks, job training programs, the Harold Whitman Foundation's Family Assistance Line. By the time they were done, the woman was crying. "Thank you," she said. "Everyone else just looks through me like I'm not even there, but you actually saw me." Claire smiled. "I know what that's like, being invisible." She handed the woman a card with phone numbers written on the back. "You're not invisible, and you're not alone. Remember that." The woman left with her toddler, clutching the card like a lifeline. Claire went back to sorting returns. And that, I think, is the real end of the story. Not the trial or the verdict or the foundation. Just a woman at a library desk, choosing to see someone that everyone else looked through. That's what it means to refuse to stay quiet. If this story hit you, share it. Drop a comment. Tell me what you would have done. And if you're out there right now, struggling, invisible, wondering if anyone sees you, I see you. You matter. Don't give up.